Well, good morning, folks. We're going to give it one more minute as people join before we get started. We're excited to see you all here today and excited for the conversation that we're going to be having this morning about affordable housing and Colorado and all of the programs and funding that is out there. So give us one more minute and we will get moving.
I see a raised hand from community builders. Is there a question, or were you just testing out your buttons?
That was an accident. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Haven't had all my coffee yet. Thanks.
Well, good morning, folks. My name is Brian Rosbert. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Colorado, and we want to welcome you to the final of 7 statewide outreach and engagement opportunities that have been offered this summer. This is brought to you by Housing Colorado, Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, Division of Housing, and the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. We're so thankful for you joining us. Just a few housekeeping matters to get off the table. We are in a webinar format today, which means we won't have the whole room together at once, but there are a couple of ways to interact and participate. One is to use the question and answer function, which is going to be monitored throughout our time today, as well as using the raise hand function. We'll probably use the raise hand function more when we get to the question and answer section at the end of our agenda today. But please feel free to keep those questions coming in. We'll be monitoring those and trying to answer them along the way. Again, we're grateful that you are here today to talk about housing. It is an issue of huge concern in our state. We continue to try to address this problem through all sorts of means, and we are hopeful that together as a community, we can come together with solutions that seek to address our housing crisis. I'm going to ask Philip to advance to the next slide, which is our agenda for the day. We are in the midst of welcome and introductions. In a few moments, we'll be spending some time talking about the housing context in Colorado, and that really gets into not only where we are, but the programs that have been stood up and the opportunities for addressing our housing issues through some of those programs. We'll spend about a little over an hour in that section of our agenda, and then we'll talk Proposition 123. So we'll have a panel discussion that I will moderate that will get into some of the nitty-gritty on Proposition 123. I know there are lots of questions out there about Prop 123 and the funding that will start to hit the ground soon, and processes and opting in and all of those things. We will try and get to all of your questions beforehand, but we have a time for questions during that panel discussion, as well as additional discussion and question time starting at about 11:30. Again, you can use the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen. Those questions will be monitored in real time, and if we can answer them in the chat, we will. Otherwise, we will elevate them to the whole group, as well as we will use the raise hand function periodically throughout the day as well. Philip, you can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to just spend, like I said, this first part of the morning outlining the housing context in Colorado. I am going to spend a little time talking about where we are, and then our friends at OEDIT and DOH and CHFA, all of the acronyms, will be talking about the programs that they are administering and kind of the things that they are up to. So we can go through the next two slides, Philip. Just a little bit about Housing Colorado. We are a membership organization representing the affordable housing community throughout the state. We're a statewide organization, and we do a couple of things. We educate the industry on the leading edge topics that are of concern to affordable housing providers and developers, as well as we advocate on behalf of the community at the state legislature. So we are excited always at the opportunities before us and energized by the crisis and the challenges that are in front of us as well. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are. This map of the United States demonstrates what's called the housing wage for states across the nation. And you can see there that Colorado has the eighth highest housing wage, coming in at $32.13 an hour. This housing wage is what it would take for a household to afford a two-bedroom rental anywhere in the state. This is an average. And on average, it would take a minimum wage two-income household it would take them 94 hours a week to be able to afford that two-bedroom rental anywhere in our state. This is a measure of kind of the way in which our housing market is out of whack right now. We continue to see this wage rise without the commensurate rise in wages. And so the gap between what folks can afford and what they're making is significant and substantial and continues to grow. And this information comes from the National Low Income Housing Coalition's Out of Reach report, which is it's a yearly report that that helps us kind of understand where we're at. I will say that the data on this does lag by a couple of years, so I would suspect that this housing wage is even more than what is displayed here on the screen. Next slide, please. This gets a little bit into the weeds on housing wage. You can see some of our most expensive areas there at the bottom left. As you might expect, some of our mountain communities come in with housing wages higher than the state average, as well as in the Denver metro area. There are about 750,000 renter households in our state. And that represents about 34% of households. And you can see some of the other stats there that that get into the nitty-gritty on this housing wage. Next slide, please. Another way of measuring our housing crisis is to talk about housing cost burden by income group. And when we talk about cost burden, there's kind of two definitions that we need to be familiar with. One is just cost burden, which means a household is spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And then there's severely cost burden, which means a household is spending more than 50% of their income on housing. And as you can see from this graph, starting on the left, extremely low income households, those making 0 to 30% of the area median income, close to 80 or more percent of them are cost burdened, and almost equally these households making the least in our state are extremely cost burdened. As you go up the income ladder, you see that less and less households are cost burdened, but the trend has been that more and more in households at higher incomes are experiencing cost burden in their household. And why this is important is when we talk about cost burden, we're talking about stability in households. We're talking about being close to experiencing homelessness if an unexpected bill comes due or an unexpected expense comes in the door. And this really has something to say about the fabric of our communities, that when households are unstable, it destabilizes our communities. It destabilizes our neighborhoods, our schools, our economic situation in these communities. And so when we see that the number of households that are cost burdened um, rising, we can intuit from that that communities are feeling more and more unstable, not only in the housing that is a part of that community, but the whole fabric of the community itself. When households are um, displaced due to any number of factors, we have kids who have to change schools. We have parents who have to commute further to jobs, and a whole host of other issues that come with housing instability. And so this is just one way that we like to look at uh, the housing crisis that we're having in the state. Next slide, please. So when we talk about our housing crisis, we're really talking about two things. One is housing cost and the other is housing supply. In terms of cost, you can see here that we've had an increase in home values that I think we've all felt, but our incomes have not kept up with that. And so we have the sixth highest median home values in the country, fourth highest median gross rent, but only the 10th highest median income. And so when there is that gap, we go back to the previous slide and think about the previous slides and think about the percent of someone's income that's being spent on housing, and how income and housing costs have not had a corollary rise, that our home values continue to rise faster than incomes do. On the supply side, we've been talking for the last couple of years about the historical way that we've gotten to where we're at in terms of housing supply. After the Great Recession, we had a 40% decrease in housing production, and that has resulted in a deficit in housing stock for the population that has continued to grow. And if we think back to our basic economics classes, when there's short supply and increased demand, housing costs go up. And so, as we've continued to grow, and as we will continue to grow as a state and population, we need more housing stock across the spectrum, but particularly for low and moderate income households. We need housing stock for other income groups as well, but we know that the market is not going to solve for our low and moderate income households in this state. And so we continue to monitor this unmet need. I think it would be really helpful if we could really put some numbers around, some other numbers around this deficit, and set some goals and targets for increasing our housing stock. Philip, we can go to the next slide.
Brian, before we get too far past that slide, I'm going to interrupt. We had a question from Elaine regarding how many families fall into each of the income levels presented here. I wasn't sure if that was something we had readily available or something we might want to dig into.
I don't have that readily available, but I can get into the gap report and get that information, I think.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I just wanted to talk really quickly before I hand it off to our friends at the Division of Housing about what's been happening over the last couple of years. So some positive developments that have taken place in the last few years in Colorado are we both have some state money that is moving into state coffers for affordable housing beyond Prop 123, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But we've also had a huge influx of federal ARPA-related COVID relief money that has hit the ground or will be hitting the ground soon. After the Affordable Housing Transformational Task Force met in 2021, they made recommendations to the legislature on how to spend over $500 million on housing and homelessness resolution in our state. And through legislative action in 2022, a number of programs were stood up, grant programs and loan programs, to help finance projects and programs that were addressing homelessness, that were addressing affordable housing. And so we had a major influx of federal one-time money that has come into the state, and that is being administered now. Grants and loans are starting to be awarded, and we'll see that money hitting the ground soon. Another positive development, as I quickly mentioned, was the passage of Proposition 123 last fall. We'll get into the details of Prop 123, but essentially what we're talking about is a high level of sustained permanent funding for affordable housing in our state. We're utilizing 0.1% of state income tax revenue to address the housing crisis in our state. And we'll get deeper into those programs and kind of how that money is being distributed in a little while. We've also had some good policy change and investment at the state level that has really helped to invest in our housing stock, and particularly in our affordable housing stock here in the state. We can go to the next slide. So where to next? At Housing Colorado, we've really been focused on hearing from our community of over 350 member organizations about what is standing in the way of housing development in their communities. And one of those things is local policy change. And so we're working to work with local housing advocates, local elected officials, change makers in communities to identify some of the friction points to housing development in their communities. And so look for more on that. But I think a lot of folks are looking towards local policy change as a next step in making sure that housing development takes place. We'll talk a little bit about Prop 123 implementation. Actually, we'll talk a lot about Prop 123 implementation here in a little bit, but this is on the horizon. How do we administer that close to or over $300 million a year that's going to be hitting the ground in the form of Prop 123 funding? And for those who were paying attention last year to the legislature, there was an effort at doing some statewide land use and zoning reform. And while Senate Bill 213 ultimately did not pass the legislature, I would expect for that to come back in this next session, perhaps not in a large omnibus bill like it did in 2023, perhaps in smaller pieces and chunks. But the conversation is ongoing, and I'd expect us to return to it in the legislature this year and as a state this year. Next slide, please, Philip. Here's my contact information. That is my email address and my cell phone number. I am always willing to take calls or emails about what's happening in terms of housing advocacy. There's a lot of great information on our website. We try and keep up to date on policy stuff on our website, but feel free to take down my information. Give me a call, send me a text or an email. Happy to answer and respond to you. That's it for me for now. I'm going to hand it off to Allison and Bo with the Division of Housing.
And I wonder if we might pause just for a moment to field a few questions that have come in during your presentation, Brian. And maybe perhaps open it up to the broader group of presenters, whoever would like to field these questions. The first, is there a process for ensuring large developers out of state are using the affordable housing credits legally when building affordable housing? I've heard that they sell them after 7 years when the builder's warranty is no longer a roadblock for them. Do they then pay back their affordable tax credit?
Hi, Matt.
Hey.
This is Jerry Lynn Francis from CHFA. I'm happy to start on that and certainly invite Steve Johnson from CHFA to also chime in if he'd like. Well, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the question. My name is Jerry Lynn Francis. I'm with CHFA, Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, and we are the statewide allocator of the low-income housing tax credit program. So when developers apply to use the tax credits to be a resource to help them raise private sector equity to support their development construction, they are agreeing to either a 30 or a 40-year LURA to preserve the affordability of that property. So the sale of the tax credit, or actually what is more accurate is they use that tax credit to draw in the private sector equity. So using that in and of itself, in order to do that, you have to agree to a 30 to 40-year term of affordability. So hope that helps provide clarity, though that program requirement is consistent whether or not that's an in-state for-profit nonprofit developer or an out-of-state for-profit nonprofit developer. And certainly, if you'd like, feel free to send me a chat, and we're always happy to help answer questions more in depth about the tax credit program offline. So thank you.
Thanks, Jerry Lynn.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Maggie's,
Sorry.
Maggie's question about construction default and contributing to a lack or to a reduction of housing build. The stats, on construction defects and especially condo development, I don't have right at hand, but I do understand there to have been a significant decrease in condo production since the enactment of construction defects legislation back, I think 2016 was when that happened. It was before my time here at Housing Colorado, but that continues to be a topic of conversation that our community has been having around construction defects, and especially how that has affected, those entry-level home ownership opportunities in the condo space.
The last question here, I think is for Housing Colorado, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding that, Mindy, but the question is from Mindy: are you coordinating with DRCOG, which is the Denver Regional Council of Governments? I know they put out an RFP for a housing needs assessment, so it seems like they're a bit behind the 8 ball. We already know the need, but they seem like an organization that could get our metro cities to work together for statewide or at least metro-wide zoning reforms.
Yes, Mindy, thanks for that. The Dr. Cog housing needs assessment is, I think, a good effort at getting at regional needs and trying to understand those regional needs a little bit better, not just housing, but how does housing connect with transit, transportation, environment, water, all of those things. And we're excited for that process. We've been talking a little bit to Dr. Cog. I think we'll be interested to see what that housing needs assessment communicates, and how we as Housing Colorado can help move forward any actions, especially in that regional capacity. We're really interested in what the regional impacts of housing shortages and housing needs have statewide. We know that that the Denver metro region isn't alone in trying to address housing from a regional perspective, and so we're excited to see that effort and continue to see them move forward with that. So thanks for that question, Mindy.
And maybe one more question here for CHFA before we jump in. Tamara asks, are you familiar with any municipality, as opposed to a developer, that are using tax credits for building housing in their community?
Thanks for the question, Tamara. Typically, the applicant of a tax credit is indeed the developer. So not necessarily a municipality themselves, although local public housing authorities are often applicants for the tax credit program. And certainly many of the developers that are leveraging the tax credit resource have strong coalitions, partnerships that involve their local community and elected officials and individual members as well. So thanks for that question.
Great. I will hand it off to Allison and Mo then at the Division of Housing.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Allison George. I am the director for the Division of Housing in DOLA, which is the Department of Local Affairs. Mo Miskell is the deputy director for the Division of Housing, and we are going to tag team today our presentation. So next slide, please. So I've been the director for 8 years now, and with the Division of Housing for last 13 years, actually. And we've seen a tremendous amount of change during that time. All very exciting because we are focused on housing people with the greatest challenges to accessing affordable, safe, and secure homes. I really want to highlight something that Brian said earlier. Over the last decade, there was a 40% reduction of housing from the previous decade. So that means we built 40% less housing across Colorado. And that is the primary reason that we are here today and why we are seeing so many pressures with housing in the state. So the Division of Housing, we report up through the executive branch. So we are a part of state government. And so as we look at the challenges that we face statewide and at the local level, we are there to partner with our local communities to achieve their housing goals. Next slide, please. So we do this through 5 different offices. We have our Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability. You'll hear from Andrew Perez a little later. He is the director of that office. And they provide grants and loans for the production of housing. We have our Office of Rental Assistance. And so Catherine Helgerson is the director of our Office of Rental Assistance. And you're going to hear some exciting news actually a little bit later from Mo about some opportunities with vouchers. But we manage over 9,500 vouchers and more to come. Kristen Toombs, you'll hear from Kristen Toombs, that's the director of our Office of Homeless Initiatives, where we're focused on all of the solutions that we know are best practices to making homelessness rare, brief, and when it occurs, non-recurring. Then we have our regulatory office where we regulate the construction of factory-built structures. From that work, it's grown to regulating mobile home parks as well. And so Mo will be highlighting some new work in that field. We have our Office of Housing Recovery. This was actually stood up because of the pandemic. So as a part of state government, when there are disasters, whether natural, pandemic, it's really the state and our partners at the local level where we look at what those solutions need to be in order to support the people living in our communities. So that's where we stood up the emergency rental assistance programs and our emergency mortgage assistance program. And then we also focus on accessibility. So in focusing on accessibility, we work with our partner agency, HCPF, which is Healthcare Policy and Finance, and housing people to allow them to work and live in their community of choice with the supports that they need for that stability. We also do home modifications with the Medicaid program, and then we also do the tax credit, home modification tax credit, really trying to work with people to help them stay in their communities of choice. Next slide, please. So we have seen over the last many years this demand for housing grow. And there has been more and more of an investment in housing, which is so important. So we've actually seen over a 500% increase in funding. And what this has allowed us to invest more in our communities. So this is from our state fiscal year 22 report. So now this data is dated actually. And so this was the investment of nearly $245 million throughout Colorado. But this isn't primarily the big stimulus funds that Brian was talking about. Next slide, please. So this is what's been really tremendous to see, is what I'd say. There have been $1.4 billion invested in the state of Colorado through the Division of Housing. And this is money from 2021, 2022, and 2023. And you can see there the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the Home Mortgage Assistance Program, which is actually half on the federal funds, funds focused on people facing homelessness, and then the state local fiscal recovery funds. Again, this is emergency rental assistance, it's our homelessness response, our navigation campuses that in the metro area that we just are reviewing applications now for that. It's the Ridgeview campus, and also those transformational grant programs that we've been administering. With these funds, I want to make sure it's clear. With this presentation today, myself and Mo, we are focusing on the future, okay? So we actually have a rolling slide deck that won't actually be shared today, but it will be available on Housing Colorado's website and our website that shows reporting out of what the progress is for these different initiatives. But today I want to focus on how we're moving forward. So you will get that accountability and that information that you need to understand where we are with these transformational funding sources. But that's not my focus today. I'm focusing on the future. Next slide, please. So you saw that tremendous amount of money. I've heard one person describe it as, imagine $100 million going through a funnel that's accustomed to $10 million. Now, of course, multiply that times 10, but you can see the pressure on our systems within the state and the Division of Housing have been tremendous. And so we are diving into this process, into our systems to improve where we're going. So looking at continuous improvement, we are looking to cut the time from application through contract execution by 50%. It's been really challenging because of the stimulus funds and all of the work that we've been doing through COVID, but we need to get those streamlined processes back up and running and improved. And so we're looking at many different ways to do that. We're looking to do template loan documents. And so very excited that we have a new operations director, Bridget Clausen-Broughton, and she started and she's diving in fast. She is an expert at assessing systems and improving upon systems. And so she will be leading most of these efforts. And one of them is a template document. And so it allows people that want to close like that to use that template document. People that want to negotiate, we will take our time and we will negotiate with you. What my hope is with that template document is not only will some people, developers, take that template document, but otherwise it will also improve the negotiation process because there will be a clear template expectation that we can start from. So excited about that. We are in the process of hiring a contract closer to track and to help move things along that seem to be, sitting for a while. And we also have a person dedicated to looking at the templates and making sure that they're up to date. That said, I think it's important to note there are over 60 different funding sources that the Division of Housing administers. And so most of those funding sources actually do need different templates. So having someone focused and keeping those up to date is important. We're looking at our systems, our technology systems, and working to improve those because it's all going to be focused on transparency for our partners, our stakeholders, and for us, which is all important. Next slide, please. But it's not just the contracting processes that we're looking at. We're also looking at our application processes. How can we streamline? How can we provide greater transparency in our application process? Because we have seen significant increases in funding requests. And so this puts additional pressure on the funds as well that we administer on a regular basis. So we're actually going to be taking an application holiday from our monthly application process in September and October of this year. And during that time, we're going to be diving into those application guidelines that we use to help set expectations with our applicants. We'll be diving into those. There will be a public process where we bring in our stakeholders to offer insight of what it is like on your side compared to what it's like as we're reviewing applications, because all perspectives are important as we dive into this information. Next slide, please. So one thing that we've heard through sessions like this during the summer engagement was that with the changes that happen at the local level with elected officials, not everyone's starting at the same understanding, same knowledge of what a decision impacts with the housing stock. So in response to that, in response to these engagement sessions, 21-1271, that's a House bill, if you're wondering, back in 2021, there was funding for a local officials toolkit. Now, we've had a guide for decades, I believe, that has been used at the local level to help guide these processes. Now, it's not quite enough. We needed to provide 101 training. We needed to provide focused trainings regionally. We needed to provide intensive technical assistance on different issues. And so together with our partners at Enterprise Community Partners and Community Builders, we created the Local Officials Toolkit. That's more than just a paper guide. It is the online trainings, it is self-guided, it is person-to-person technical assistance. And so through that process, we've made several awards already to the Leadville Lake County Regional Housing Authority, Mesa County Valley School District, the Regional Housing Authority for La Plata County, the Upper Ark COG, the Town of Granby, Broomfield Housing Alliance, and City of Fort Morgan. And so we're excited to be partnering with them to help them achieve their housing goals. So with that, next slide, please. I want to hand it over to Mo, and Mo will walk us through our regulatory changes that are happening and then start us off into Prop 123. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Can everybody hear me okay? Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Allison had earlier mentioned our Office of Regulatory Oversight, one of our 5 offices within Division Housing. This is the arm of the division that's focused on the more regulatory aspects of our work. And I'm going to start with our newest program, the Mobile Home Park Oversight Program, which came into existence in 2019. And it is a program that impacts roughly 744 mobile home parks across the state, which includes roughly 52,000 homes. And this is a program that's been evolving since 2019. We've had a variety of bills passed between then and now to really address a variety of needs from this sector. As you can imagine, when one party owns a home sitting on land that they do not own, and that mobile home is not so mobile, there's some issues that arise, and this program was created to resolve those disputes. But one of the more recent things we discovered is access to water. Not only access to water, but access to potable water. And we had a variety of concerns come up starting last winter, around December, running through April, where we had to intervene, the Division of Housing that is, through this program, and issue what we call cease and desist orders against 4 different parks to force them to provide accessible water to their residents. For a variety of reasons, that was not occurring. And as we worked through those concerns, we realized that it wasn't just access to water that was an issue, it was access to quality water. And as you can see from this slide, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment really has jurisdiction over that particular issue. So a bill was passed this past legislative session, provided with more tools in its tool chest to address this particular concern. And we have been identified as a partner through that process, really through our registration program, getting more information and providing more information to the public about these parks and whether they're complying with any findings from CDPHE concerning their quality of water. So we're really excited to partner with CDPHE and roll out this new initiative. If you're interested about more information about this, please don't hesitate to visit our website or of course, reach out to me directly with any questions, comments, or concerns. Next slide, please.
And Mo, before we move off of mobile homes, I'm wondering if we can address this question from Mary Ellen. Wondering, of the 52,000 or so mobile homes, how many residents does that represent, and how many of those residents are owners? I don't know if we have any insight into that, what that might break down to.
I do not have that breakdown handy, but I do have a link that has our data. Let me get that to you and drop it in the chat. Will that help? Let me just make sure I'm sending it to everybody, not just the hosts. I actually do not see an option to send to everyone.
If you drop it to in the chat to the host, I'd be happy to pass it directly along to Mary Ellen in the Q&A.
Sounds good. Thank you. There you go. Great question. Thank you for that. Let me know if that didn't get through.
Got it. Thanks, Mo.
Thank you. All right, the other program within the Office of Regulatory Oversight is our Building Codes and Standards section. As Allison mentioned earlier, this particular unit oversees all the off-site modular construction across the state. When something is built in a plant in Texas and arrives in a local building department's jurisdiction, as you can imagine, they have no idea how it's built. They can't see within those walls. And of course, we don't want them tearing it apart. So we have a statewide program to help with that regard. Oops, I think we're on the old slide here. Do you mind moving up one more slide? Perfect, thank you. And what we have done more recently is address tiny homes. So for those of you who were participating in last year's Housing Colorado Summer Engagement Series, you heard us talk quite a bit about tiny homes. Historically, Colorado and most of the country, for that matter, didn't really adequately address the wave of interest in tiny homes, which is great. It's always good to have another option available for consumers with regard to housing. But unfortunately, the vast majority of this type of housing was really not built to any particular construction code that was deemed to be safe. And it also has been confused with a particular model called the park model that really, while it looks just like a home, and it is for a lot of people in Colorado, it's actually not designed for long-term occupancy. It's actually designed to the recreational vehicle standards. And so in 2022, led by Larimer County, a bill was passed to differentiate a tiny home that is now defined in Colorado state law that is designed for long-term occupancy from this other version that looks a lot like it, the park model. We've been spending the summer and the spring updating our administrative rules to effectively implement this new program and regulate tiny homes. We are now operational. We've gone live. So anyone interested in purchasing a regulated tiny home, by that I mean something that has been inspected and certified by the state, you should be looking out for those effective anytime since early January. So if you're a developer interested in tiny homes, or you're somebody that wants to build tiny homes, or somebody wants to purchase it, there's a lot more information about this on our website as well. Next slide, please. And this is something that Allison touched upon earlier. We are excited to announce, well, first of all, we issue over 9,000 vouchers across the state. We are getting an additional 800, and those are both federal and state. We're getting an additional 800 in state vouchers to add to that pipeline. And as Allison mentioned, we're currently going through a process of revisiting our process to see what could be done more efficiently and effectively. And she had mentioned on the development side, But of course, on the voucher side, we want to make sure we get these to be more accessible, quicker and faster, and get people housed faster. And so we're going through a lean event this year. We're hoping to start next month on that. Excited about that. So if anyone is interested and has good ideas about how to make this process a lot more effective and efficient, we want to hear from you. And so stay tuned for updates about this process as we roll it out. Hopefully you're all signed up for our Division of Housing newsletter or e-blast. If not, please do get signed up for it, because that's how we're going to be communicating about this awesome initiative coming forward here in the near future. Next slide, please. Proposition 123. Brian did a great job of teeing this up. And of course, our friends at CHFA and OEDIT, for that matter, have a huge part of this. So you'll be hearing more from them a little bit later about the details concerning their 3 programs. But as you can see from this slide, these are the funds that we're talking about. So finally, there's going to be some dedicated money that will make a difference in the affordable housing sector coming from the state. These are not one-time funds, hopefully not. These will be recurring funds as long as the economy is in good shape. And as you can see from the first fiscal year, we received $160 million for this fund, the State Affordable Housing Fund. And that's for half a year. Just keep that in mind. And that's why you see difference, almost a doubling in fiscal year 2, 2023 through 2024. So for the first year, half a fiscal year, this is money collected from January 1st through June 30th of this year. We have received this money. 40% of it will be going or has come to the Department of Local Affairs in what is called the Affordable Housing Support Fund. As you can see, the emphasis on support. The other 60% going to OEDIT, who is partnered with CHFA to administer those dollars as part of the Affordable Housing Financing Fund. All right, so those are the 2 different funds coming out of State Affordable Housing Fund, 40% to DOLA and its 3 programs, 60% to OEDIT CHFA for their 3 programs. Next slide, please. Now, this slide touches upon the 3 programs within the Department of Local Affairs. The first 2 are with the Division of Housing that Allison and I are speaking on behalf. And then the third one, I should say, is with our sister agency, the Division of Local Government. The first program highlighted here is our homeownership program. And 50% of our 40% of the funds are going to that program. And you can see the breakdown of the funds between year 1 and year 2. And then the second program is our homelessness program, where 45% of our 40% will be going to. And last but not least is the local planning capacity development program that'll be administered and handled by Division of Local Government that I mentioned earlier, and that will receive 5% of our 40%. And I think Allison will now be touching upon the homelessness and homeownership programs. Next slide, please.
I wonder if DOH, sorry to interrupt again. I wonder if we might take a small pause here we have a ton of great questions coming in, and I want to make sure that we address them and we don't fall too far behind. So if we could open these up, some of these I think may it'd be good to have input from all of our partners here on the call, but many of them are for DOH specifically. I want to start with Karen's question from regarding fair share program in Durango. So Karen writes that City of Durango has a fair share program where developers can opt out of building affordable housing by paying a small fine, what we call a fee in lieu policy. So the city holds onto the money, eventually using a local nonprofit to distribute the funds to low-income folks for down payments, etc. How can we make progress in housing when these programs exist? Developers must be made to build affordable housing, whatever that means. Are there other fair share programs throughout Colorado?
That is a great question, and there are, but we don't have the full accounting with us of what those programs are around the state. So we can share that information. It looks like Hillary wants to add as well at a later date. Hillary, did you want to add?
Sure. I don't want to get too far into this, but before my current job, I was in local government, and those are generally referred to as housing mitigation programs around the state. And usually it comes with option, sort of a payment in lieu option, which is basically what you're describing. I know several especially resort rural communities have recently updated the cost per square foot to make it more, if you're going to pay out, then you've got to actually pay the cost that it, costs the local developer to build. I mean, the local government to build affordable housing. That's a political decision, and you should probably do that. But there are some examples around the state. I can also tell you on the other side that many of those programs have been threatened with litigation from homeowners, developers, builders, etc. So just a couple ideas for you.
Thank you, Hillary. Our next question comes from Hillary Carter, asking how are DOLA and CHFA working together to align funding regulations / scoring for layered funding stacks? For example, the state's QAP, various new funding sources, scoring criterion.
We have worked collaboratively with CHFA and others since I've known working with them. So there are great partnerships there. And so a good example of that is with the Permanent Supportive Housing Toolkit, where we both DOH and CHFA help fund the toolkit. And then as a part of the services underwriting, voucher underwriting, tax credit underwriting, and the gap underwriting, we're communicating constantly through that process to ensure that the funds are allocated in a way that best support the projects. This will also be something that we're looking at during that application holiday as well, ways that we can continue to grow that partnership. But it's definitely, they are our friends at CHFA, and I'm sure that they feel similarly with us as well. At least I hope. How about that?
Absolutely, Allison, thank you. And this is Jerry Lynn Francis again from CHFA. We very much enjoy our partnership with our colleagues at Division of Housing and also with our partners at OEDIT, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. And specific to the question in terms of leveraging and aligning the newer resources through Proposition 123, our three organizations, including even others from under the DOLA umbrella, the Division of Local Government, we meet regularly to ensure that we are coordinating on each other's efforts with respect to all aspects of Proposition 123. Certainly that measure, which we're going to talk a lot more in depth today, so I don't want to get too far into it, but we'll allow others to elaborate as the conversation on that measure continues. Prop 123 gives us some really powerful, tremendous resources that are new to the table, but they're not the silver bullet. Just like all of the other resources we have available, they in and of themselves won't solve. So we are very strategic about seeking where we can align for leverage to ensure resources can be complementary to other available resources, and then also looking strategically at those resources that are designed to be newer, innovative, right? And so how do we craft those program guidelines to reach into spaces where perhaps we haven't been able to reach into before? So it's a great question, and thank you for that. Well, again, we'll continue to talk about that more throughout the day.
Thanks, Mary Lynn. Don has a question that goes back, I think, to Mo, your presentation on mobile home park regulation. Pertaining to water specifically, Don asks, does water quality include water pressure too? And do you only deal with complaints from residents, or can others act on their behalf due to maybe a resident's fear of retaliation despite all the rules against that?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Don. Always appreciate communicating with you. I believe this is Don from Golden. I was just actually chatting with Christina Postolowski, our program manager for the Mobile Home Park Oversight Program, and she shared that the water quality bill, she does not believe addresses issues of pressure unless low pressure is contributing to sediment in the water or other chemicals that are part of quality. However, our program, the Mobile Home Park Oversight Program, can address complaints about low pressure, And so if there are any complaints about that, please direct those folks experiencing that to us, and communicating with our fine staff at the Mobile Home Park Oversight Program to help work through those concerns. And then I think he had also asked if Mobile Home Park Oversight Program can address complaints about, if complaints can be submitted by others other than residents. At this time, only homeowners, so not all residents, the way law is constructed is homeowners can file a complaint, but others can act as agents and assist them in filing that complaint. There is a period of time where there'll be a transition though to open it up a bit. And starting on July 1st of 2024, we will be able to take complaints from local governments and nonprofits. So until July 1st of 2024, it's only complaints from homeowners, although others may assist them with it. On and after July 1st, the law opens it up for us to receive complaints from local governments and nonprofits on behalf of renters, etc. And we can also get complaints from renters at that time as well. So not just limited to mobile homeowners. Does that help, Don? Great questions.
Thanks, Mo. And while we're on the topic, I wonder if we might also address Bill's question. Bill asks, what about the possibility of tiny homes in existing mobile home parks to perhaps replace RVs and mobile homes that are in poor condition within those parks?
Sorry, can you repeat that one?
So Bill had a question that was also along the lines of mobile home parks that I wonder if we might address while we're on the topic. Bill asks, what about the possibility of tiny homes in existing mobile home parks to perhaps replace RVs and mobile homes that are in poor conditions in those parks?
I wasn't quite fine. What about them replacing mobile homes?
I think the idea of tiny homes being a replacement for maybe mobile homes that are in kind of dilapidated condition already within mobile home parks.
Whether that's an option, of course there's an option. Just keep in mind that a park model, once again, is something that's not designed for long-term occupancy, but it may be referred to as a tiny home, right? And so if somebody's planning on living there full-time all year round in a mobile home park, then that's probably not a good product for them. What we would rather than see, what we would rather see is them being occupied or occupying a tiny home as regulated by Division of Housing, which is a new product that is in fact designed for long-term occupancy. So just keep that in mind. Definitely a viable product to utilize and replace aging mobile homes. But I would recommend replacing aging mobile homes with something that's actually designed for long-term occupancy, whether it be a HUD code home, a manufactured home regulated by the federal government, right? Which are designed to be installed on a temporary or permanent foundation. And of course, in the mobile home park setting, it makes sense to install on temporary foundation, or a tiny home as regulated by Division of Housing, which also could be on a temporary or permanent foundation. So if you have any other questions or concerns about that, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'll drop my email address in the chat here, and hopefully Matt can send it out to everybody. Great question.
You bet. Yeah, thank you, Mo. We'll take a few more before we jump back into the presentation. Treasurer Young has a question for DOH asking, has DOH developed a forecast of how much more money you'll need beyond the 1.4 billion to address the shortfall of affordable and accessible housing units?
Matt, you cut out right at the important part. Can you read?
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
So the question from Treasurer Young, has DOH developed a forecast how much more money you'll need beyond the 1.4 billion to adequately address the shortfall of affordable and accessible housing units?
Thank you for that question, Treasurer Young. Great question. And we don't have a current forecast of how much money we will need. I'd have to say that we want to have that forecast as we're looking at these 225 units on 1,000 units on this slide, saying that we're short of both rental and homeownership units. It really depends on the available resources partnered together with tax credits and then gap financing. And so with all of the sources of funds that have come in recently and the demands because of the pandemic and other economic factors, we don't have an updated gap source of need. And so happy to take a look at that and talk more with you about it. Great question.
And Matt, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to the mobile home questions. The other important piece to know why it's important to not only occupy something that's designed for long-term occupancy because it's designed for that, is the mobile home park oversight program actually does not have jurisdiction over recreational vehicles. So if you are in a park model home, which is designed to recreational vehicle standards, then that home would not fall under the mobile home park oversight program, and you would not receive and be afforded those protections under that the Mobile Home Park Act. So just an important piece to also consider as you're contemplating which product type to go with if you're looking to replace aging mobile home stock in a mobile home park.
Excellent. Thank you, Mo. I wonder if we might go back to our presentation here, and then maybe we can take another question break at the end of the slides here, just to make sure that we address everybody's questions.
So is that back to me, Matt? Thank
Back
you.
to you. Thanks.
Absolutely. And so also I wanted to follow up again on Treasurer Young's question. I think during that application holiday, that will be the perfect time as we're developing our third annual report together with looking at the application and what funding we may be putting into future projects. It would be a good time for us to dive into that question. So thank you for that. So this first slide is on home ownership, and you've all had quite a bit of time to actually read it, I think. So if we could go to the next slide, I will just skip over that. So this really goes through how we are taking applications. So we are looking at our monthly application process to do both acquisition, new construction, and rehab. And you can see the eligible applicants as well as a part of that monthly application process. This also will go for mobile home park acquisition. And so this could be groups or associations of mobile home owners or their assignees. So these applications started July 1st. We are looking at applications now as we're looking at how to administer that $32 million in the first year. We also do revolving loan fund programs, and so those are the owner repair and the down payment assistance programs. We do annual applications already for those, and so we will be folding the Proposition 123 to grow those programs beyond where they are right now. And so those will be done through our annual application process, and with our owner repair program, we're actually going to do a special one September 1st. So that is coming up really fast. If you're interested in the owner repair program, please, please, please let us know. Next slide, please. So on our homelessness programs with Proposition 123, we're really looking at what that demand is. And so as you're looking at the need, you can see we have a lot of Coloradans that are very challenged with housing and are working through the different systems. So with the homelessness programs, we're really looking at that continuum of need and where we can have the most transformational impact with those funds. Next slide, please. And so for our application processes and our priorities and timing for the $28.8 million that will be coming through the Division of Housing through Proposition 123. We will also fold monthly applications in for that, for the development of supportive housing. So if you're applying for the development of supportive housing, it's a monthly application process. Bridge housing, also the monthly application process. We're folding several things into our annual ESG NOFA. And these are uses of funds that are eligible for the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. And so we have used the marijuana tax cash funds to help grow the best practices within the ESG program. We're now going to also use Proposition 123. And so we're looking to fund outreach, rapid rehousing, and then also supportive services through our annual ESG NOFA. We also do annual PSH NOFA, so that's permanent supportive housing. We will also fold supportive services from Proposition 123 into that application process. And then lastly, with a prevention, specifically emergency rental assistance and eviction diversion, we will be doing a special NOFA for those uses. And that will actually be coming out at the same time as our ESG NOFA, because we're trying to limit the amount of confusion with all the different sources of funds. So we are planning to release these at the same time, and those will be coming out soon. Next slide, please. So with that, I will turn it back to Mo, and he can talk about our partner work with the Division of Local Government and the opting in process. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Allison. So the Division of Local Government is our sister agency that's taking the lead on this particular program, the third of our DOLA programs under Prop 123. And in order to help to really get the process started, if you will, get the juices flowing for local governments, Division of Local Government has done a great job of hiring a contractor, Logan Simpson, to help us with education outreach, helping local governments better understand what Proposition 123 is asking of them, and of course, how it's all laid out in Proposition 123 for local government to really understand and apply the requirements in order to submit an effective commitment, which I'll get into a little bit more detail here later. And we've created a 5-part series, the webinar series, for the month of August. We've already had 3 very effective discussions with various types of local government. We started with a series. The first of the series was with large urban, and then we had one with small municipalities, and more recently, last week, rural resort. So we've got 2 left. One of them is taking place, I believe, this Thursday from 2 to 4. And that's with the unincorporated counties, of course, counties representing the unincorporated parts of the county. And then last but not least, rural. And that will be taking place, I believe, on August 30th. So if you're interested, and all these are recorded, they're on our website towards the end of this presentation. I'll share with you the link to our website so you can view this recording so if you didn't have a chance to make any of those meetings. But hopefully you can catch at least one of the 2 last meetings. You don't have to be representing a county or rural government in order to participate in those discussions. If you missed the other ones, or you're just interested in general, please join us for those opportunities. Next slide, please. Oh, and actually, before I get to this slide, I'm dropping in a chat.
Mo, you are muted.
Oh, I don't know how I did that. Fascinating. Anyway, I just dropped something in the chat for you, Matt. If you could share this out to everybody, it'd be greatly appreciated. This is for those who represent local government who are interested in providing feedback on how the Division of Local Government can make this local planning capacity program more effective and really tailor as much as possible to your needs. Please don't hesitate to use a survey. You can also email Andy Hill directly with any of those comments. So hopefully that message got through. And apologies for muting myself somehow. What I would like to highlight from this slide here is the fast track guidance development. That's number 2 on the slide. This is a requirement that's in the law, Proposition 123, as originally drafted, but doesn't go in effect until the next 3-year cycle. So for these first 3 years, starting November 1st of this year, this is not something that's required, but it is an important piece. And we do get a lot of questions and comments and concerns about it, as you can imagine. How do we create a 90-day process for reviewing affordable housing projects and what that exactly means? What are the exact requirements? We're going to start those discussions. We're planning on starting those discussions in October of this year. So stay tuned for more information about that. Next slide, please. I hope you guys can still hear me. All right, so I touched upon this earlier, local government commitments. So for the first 3-year cycle, these are due by November 1st of this year. The good news is we rolled it out sooner than that. So we rolled out the process on May 1st. We have had 42 jurisdictions so far, which is fantastic. Take advantage of this. Representing municipalities, small to large, urban, rural resort, counties for the unincorporated parts, etc. So a variety, which we're very excited about, covering roughly 44% of the state population-wise, which is fantastic. So an excellent start. We still have a couple more months to go, and we have another 5 applicants that we received towards the end of last week that we're actually reviewing tomorrow. So hopefully we'll be adding 5 more to that list of 42 that have had commitments successfully filed with us. So that's excellent news. If you're a local government that is interested in opting in by November 1st, this is the website link to use to do that at the bottom right here, or you can of course just use the QR code. And then to help with that though, first and foremost, a local government has to establish its baseline of affordable housing. Next slide, please. This nifty tool will help you do that. So when we originally rolled out resources to help local governments, keep in mind a local government by law has to establish its baseline of affordable housing using a definition in the law that may be different from its own definition or other definitions that exist, where it's saying rentals at 60% and for sales at 100%. That you have to identify that for your jurisdiction, right? And commit to increase that baseline by 3% each year. For a 3-year commitment, that means 9% over 3 years. And that is for a local government to determine what that baseline is, and of course, commit to increase it. That's not for us, the Division of Housing, or anyone else to make that determination or make that commitment. It is for the local government to do that, and now to also include tribal governments as a result of House Bill 23-1304. So initially, when we rolled out data to help local governments using the resources outlined in statute that are very specific, we came up with a data set, a spreadsheet, if you will, making those determinations for you as a starting point. We have since received a lot of feedback that is helpful, but not enough in some instances. So we came up with this baseline assistance tool. Connor Everson from our team, as well as his staff members, came up with it. And we've had a lot of success interacting with local governments using this tool on identifying what really works best for them, using, of course, working within, I should say, the framework of the law. And this is how you can access that tool. So you really want to visit this tool first. If the data set that's already available is not meeting your needs, of course, you don't need this tool if you're completely comfortable with the numbers provided in the original data set. So just, you can use either one. We've seen a mixture in the 42 successful commitments so far. I'd say roughly maybe half have used the original data set, and the other half have used the baseline assistance tool. And then, of course, if you ever have any questions or comments or concerns about either, don't hesitate to reach out to our office. Next slide, please. Now, as you can see, we have been communicating through a variety of mechanisms on Proposition 123 with, of course, our partners, OEDIT and CHFA and Division of Local Government, and have been spending a lot of time having those discussions. And for good reason. It's an important proposition. It provides access to dollars that are badly needed, as touched upon earlier. And it is also a complicated process. It's not easy to understand it and comprehend. And so we've been spending a lot of time in a variety of formats having these conversations. These are just a highlight of some. We're also having several planned conversations besides the 5-part webinar series that I talked about. We're meeting with Park County and its intergovernmental meeting tomorrow evening in Alma. We're meeting Friday with the CCI at the CCI Western District meeting in Montrose. On August 30th, we are at the Boulder County Housing Summit, having conversation about Prop 123 there as well. And then on August 31st, we're speaking to Clear Creek County Commissioners. September 7th, the Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs. And then we have a variety of other efforts coming along in September as well. So a lot of opportunities to talk about Proposition 123. And if you've not heard directly from us and you're interested in learning more about Proposition 123, of course, you've got an exciting panel discussion coming up. But if you got some really technical questions or something very specific to your jurisdiction you want to unpack with us, do not hesitate to reach out to us. I believe Matt provided my email address earlier. And one more slide should give you the website address that I mentioned earlier for all things related to Proposition 123, specifically the commitment aspects of it. Of course, you'll hear later from our friends at CHFA about the specifics regarding their programs, and they've got a great website with more details for that. But if you're interested in the baseline setting in particular, and how to file a commitment, and frequently asked questions about either of those two things, and of course, resources that include the original law, the House bill that amended it, etc., please visit this website. And I believe that is a wrap. And here's our contact information. If you have any questions or comments about anything that Alice and I just presented today. And sorry, we went a little bit over time, but we had a lot of great questions that we had to field. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Mo and Allison. And again, my name is Jerry Lynn Francis. I'm with Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. So I get the pleasure of speaking with the group for the next few minutes to give an update on some of the strategic priorities that CHFA has for this year. We are a little over time. I want to be very respectful of everyone's time on the call, and I know there's a lot of interest in Proposition 123. So I'm going to expedite my comments a bit just to make sure that we save enough time for that panel. But once again, just make myself and the whole CHFA team available to all in this group. I will put my email in the chat as soon as I close my remarks. You're always welcome to reach out to me or others on the CHFA team if you'd like to dive deeper on any aspect of our work. So let's go ahead and get right into it, Matt, and go to the next slide, please. For those of you who might be newer to CHFA, let me just spend a quick minute talking about who we are overall as an organization. We are not a state agency. We love, as I previously shared, our partnership with our state agency partners, Division of Housing, Division of Local Government, Office of Economic Development, International Trade. But we are separate and distinct from the state. The state created us almost 50 years ago and asked us to go out to the private markets and raise capital that way, and then bring that investment back into Colorado. So our statutory authority to do what we do does exist and was created by state government, but the state nor the federal government fund what we do. So we go out and raise that money from the private sector. We have a dual purpose mission of affordable housing and economic development, and to support both aspects of that mission, in our nearly 50-year tenure, CHFA has raised and deployed over $32.5 billion all across the state. We say we exist solely for purpose of fulfilling our mission, and we do that because we believe that everyone in Colorado should have the opportunity for housing stability and economic prosperity. And it's great to be with nearly 250 other people on this call today who are sharing that passion and interest. So thank you for spending your morning with us. Next slide. Okay, our work spans what I call 4 areas of investment. The most significant area of investment is our work in the homeownership space, working with the private sector community to make 30-year fixed rate mortgage loans available to low and moderate income home buyers, offering down payment assistance to support them in their dreams of homeownership, and also sponsoring homebuyer education class, working with HUD approved homebuyer education providers all across the state. In our work in the rental housing space, we are most well known, perhaps, for being the allocator of the state and federal low-income housing tax credit program, something we've already talked about with you all today. We're going to talk a little bit more about, but also we are a lender in that space, providing both construction and permanent finance to for-profit and nonprofit developers who are building affordable apartment communities in Colorado. Our business lending mission, increasing access to capital for small and medium-sized businesses, and our community partnerships platform, which works to expand technical assistance, engage with communities all across Colorado, and also support our really critical and vibrant nonprofit community who is leaning into the housing space and all the supporting issues and challenges that go along with housing stability, including food access, childcare, mobility, energy assistance, etc. So next slide. You can see here at a glance our investment just last year. So this is just 2022's investment, and this illustrates that footprint of investing across our 4 areas. This is also available on our website with more detailed breakdown if you'd like to dive into the different work. Next slide, please. Let me quickly highlight one area that I know is always of interest, and that's our work in the tax credit space. So this year, we have completed our first competitive allocation round. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Matt. And that was conducted earlier this year. This was our 9% tax credit round. We received 26 applications seeking to support 1,200 affordable rental housing units. We fully deployed the resources available to us, and with that, we were able to support 12 developments. And you can see the communities within which those 12 developments will be located. That will support the development or preservation of over 600 units. So much pressure on the tax credit program right now in terms of demand outpacing availability. We continue to see the demand for that resource increase, not just because there is such a need for affordable housing all across the state, so many folks leaning in to support that need, but also continued rising costs, rising interest rates, other competitive factors that are putting increased pressure on making those deals be financially feasible. So certainly ask everyone to lean into the federal legislation, the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, that is urging Congress to increase the amount of 9% tax credits that we in states have available to deploy. As you can clearly see on this slide, we certainly have more projects that are shovel ready and meeting the criteria than we have resources available to deploy. And we'd love to be able to support more of those. Let's keep going, please. This gives you a visual map of where those developments supported in round 1 are located, but also shows the diversity of markets that the tax credit program is able to support. So not just any one kind of development, but certainly distinct developments serving families, older adults, supportive housing, and our special populations as well. And the diversity also spans different AMI points, which you'll see on the next slide, showing, getting ahead of myself. This is the list of developments. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Matt. Thank you. This is the slide I was thinking of that shows the diversity of AMIs that the tax credit projects supported in round 1 will be serving. Again, income averaging with the tax credit program allows developments supported to serve up to 80% of area median income as adjusted by county and household size, so long as the overall average of tenants supported is at 60% of area median income. We were pleased to see some of the developments coming in serving that wide range. Also here you can see, again, numerically, the types of residents supported at the different projects that were awarded. Thank you. Next slide, Matt. Because we know that the needs are so expansive across the state, and we love our work with the tax credit program, but certainly there are needs that exist beyond the tax credit program. We've heard loud and clear from our community partners the demand for resources to support more of middle income rental housing. So that's housing for individuals earning between 80 and 120% of area median income. Next slide, please. And so back in 2017 and just before, CHFA innovated a program called our Middle Income Access Program, and that serves as mezzanine debt to provide gap financing to developers who are building rental housing serving that middle income market. Since that time, you can see the number of developments that we've been able to support with that resource. Allison showed on one of her earlier slides a $25 million investment that the state made to further elevate our middle income access program 2 sessions ago, 2 legislative sessions ago. So not in the 2023 session, but in the 2022 session. And we've been thrilled to be able to put those resources to work as well, closing on one deal and another deal in process, and a full pipeline, in fact, for that particular $25 million allocation. So certainly know that the demand is strong for resources in this middle income housing space. Next slide, please, Matt. Shifting over to our homeownership work, I wanted to make sure to highlight some of the really important community engagement work that our homeownership team has been involved in the past few years, and that's our Own Your Tomorrow homeownership campaign. As I said at the onset, CHFA is committed to making sure that everyone in Colorado has the opportunity for housing stability and economic prosperity. And certainly there is a gap that we see not only nationwide, but in Colorado as well, in terms of the homeownership rate amongst white Coloradans as compared to communities of color. And so we have embarked on some very intentional engagement work, in particular, next slide, please, Matt, with the Black and African American community in Colorado to try and better understand the barriers and the challenges that community is facing as they pursue their path to homeownership. And those engagement sessions have helped us to create a roadmap to help engage more fully with Black and African American community and to think strategically about our offerings in the homeownership space and how we might better align with community to support their needs and their journey. And so we have over the summer continued that work, hosting some workshops, homebuyer education workshops in community with our lending, realtor, and homebuyer education partners. We have some upcoming workshops, one on September 27th, Wednesday, from 6 to 8 p.m. Would really value your attending and also sharing this workshop and other offerings with your community members. There is more information about this initiative on our website, and I will put the link to that particular information in the chat again when I'm done, and have really enjoyed our work in this space. Next slide, please. This also shows some of the events, community-led events that our team has participated in furtherance of our engagement work here. Next slide, please. And to further support our efforts, not only are we hosting homebuyer education forums, but also a getting to know you engagement series, meeting one-on-one with key members of community. That's been a really helpful sounding board to help us ensure that as we continue to implement our roadmap, that we're hearing timely feedback from community members to help us continue to inform, refine, shape our engagement. Once you craft a roadmap, you can't just implement. You want to make sure that we're hearing that feedback ongoing and adjusting as we need to. Thank you. That engagement work does not live only in our homeownership space, but certainly CHFA has been pleased to add regional community representatives who live and work all across the state of Colorado to help ensure our engagement statewide across all of our investment offerings, our homeownership platform, our rental housing platform, our economic development platform. And so here you see a map and contact information for all of our regional CRMs. We were pleased at the end of last year to add Tricia Herman to our team to cover Eastern Colorado. And so now we have our regional map more fully completed. I know there are several of you on with us today who might be from parts of the state, so I encourage you to reach out to your local CRM if you haven't already and get a chance to get to know them. We look forward to meeting with you. Next slide. Okay, with that, I want to just highlight some of the work that CHFA has been doing over the year in Proposition 1, 2, 3. And so I'm going to give a brief overview of those programs that we are administering on behalf of OEDIT, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Next slide, please, Matt. So before we dive into the programs, let me just give a quick reminder. I know we covered this a little bit earlier, but just to remind, so when voters passed Proposition 1, 2, 3, that created the State Affordable Housing Fund, using existing tax revenue and directing a portion of tax revenue into that fund, which was then split 40-60, with 40% that will be managed and administered by our colleagues at DOLA, including Division of Housing and Division of Local Government. And then 60% of that, which is directed to the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, which we at CHFA have been pleased to be hired as contract administrator for. This slide will show you the amount of funding available within those two respective funds in our first half fiscal year, and then the second year, which is a full fiscal year. Next slide, please. So on the CHFA edit side, Proposition 123 was really clear and specific about the ways that we could deploy those resources, and that's through 3 program areas. The first is the land banking program. That allows us resources to provide grants to local or tribal governments or forgivable loans to nonprofits that might be wanting to purchase land and bank it for a future affordable housing use. The second is an equity program, which allows us to use these resources as equity to support the development or preservation of low and middle income affordable rental housing. And then the third is a concessionary debt program, which offers us the opportunity to provide financing for 4 eligible uses. And those uses include new construction of lower middle income housing, preservation of lower middle income rental housing, pre-development or gap financing for tax credit eligible projects, or to support modular and factory build manufacturers, so the business themselves. We're going to get into a lot more detail as we go into the Proposition 123 panel today. So I think I'll pause on the program descriptions for now. But what I will share, next slide, please, is we've been pleased to launch a website, Colorado Affordable Housing Financing Fund.com, and you have the QR code there, which will take you right to that website. And this website houses all of the program information for these 3 financing fund offerings, the land banking, the equity, and the debt. And then we've called out a special piece for the modular as well. So all of the information that I just shared and much more is available on that website. We also have a link on this website to sign up for an e-news, for announcements, for engagement sessions, technical assistance webinars, and key program information that we will be deploying as we roll out the Affordable Housing Financing Fund. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to pause. Sorry for the rushed presentation. My apologies on that, but welcome your questions throughout the remainder of this morning. And again, look forward to connecting with you all further either today or offline. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Jerry Lynn. And I wonder if we might take a quick break just to answer a few more great questions that have come in. And thank you to our presenters for answering some in writing as well. We're trying to keep up with the flurry of great input and questions here. Oriana asks, I think relating to the Affordable Housing Support Fund, so this may be a question for DOH. While it is amazing to have an additional 28 million going to homelessness housing, and that I think refers to that year 1 allocation, spreading that over 7 categories feels very tight. Is there a breakdown of funding split per category or additional term sheet to follow?
This is Kristen Toombs. I hope you guys can hear me. I can say that we're going to get into that in a little bit in the panel where we can talk about where for the homelessness related activities, the different activities and how we will do that. We have not set aside a specific amount. We've got some ideas and ranges, but yeah, we're happy to get into that a little bit more in the panel coming up.
Thank you, Kristen. Another question for DOH, does the application break affect when the ESC NOFA will be released?
That one's for me too. No, it will not. The application break is specifically in regards to the development side. Anything else such as the PSHRFA, sorry, supportive housing, the creation of supportive housing annual RFA that we have, or the ESG NOFA will continue as usual.
Thank you, Kristen. Sharon asks, what about true suburban areas where we don't have the amenities of big cities, but don't have the transportation, and we're also not quite rural? We need help. And Sharon, I don't know if that was in regard to a specific program area or in regard to Proposition 123 perhaps, but if you have any additional clarity, feel free to drop that in the Q&A. But wanted to maybe throw that question to the group at large. Resources for suburban areas in addressing housing needs.
Well, I'll chime in here. So thank you for the question. And yes, please, if this was in regards to a specific program, please let us know. I know that as we are looking at Proposition 1, 2, 3 and crafting guidelines for that program, keeping in mind the distinctions across different regional areas, what their needs, what their opportunities and challenges are, is certainly top of mind for us. So we know that, for example, priorities we need to deploy resources to, which include density, mixed income, and environmental sustainability. Those can all look and implement very differently in a city center area versus a non-urban, rural, or more suburban city area. So appreciate the comment, and certainly that is something that we're looking to in our work with OEDIT on Proposition 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
And I think I'll just quickly add that we're still developing the details for that priority that is required in statute for environmental sustainability. But part of that is most likely to be adjacency to transit-oriented developments, walkability to basic services, et cetera. So I think a lot of these funds are going to be directed towards those areas that have those types of amenities already established to keep things affordable and reduce our dependencies on cars, and continue to work on this towards the state's climate mitigation goals, et cetera. So as Jerry Lynn said, these things look different in different jurisdictions, and coming from a rural community, I'm very well aware of those challenges, and projects will be required to meet our environmental sustainability criteria. So there's got to be sort of a balance between that, but that can be done on a project by project basis.
Thanks,
And
Hillary.
I would just add, Matt, this is Kristen Toombs again with Division of Housing, that our colleagues at Division of Local Government, and we also have some toolkits around helping local governments, local leaders, local communities develop those skills and tools and bring in the, that information needed to think through, what does affordable housing look like in your community? What are those strategies and capacities? So just hearing you say we need help, I think there is help if you look at some of those. I don't know if any of those partners or colleagues rather are on that can share more, but I would direct you towards some of those toolkits and trainings, those kinds of resources for local governments and local communities.
Excellent. Thank you, Kristen. I wonder if we might take one more question and then hand it over to our friends at OEDIT so that we can keep things moving toward our Prop 123 panel. This question from an anonymous attendee reads, I'm a landlord housing extremely low income senior citizens. People face challenges with needs. They can't access transportation, healthcare, mental health care, food, and help with activities of daily living. These resources have extremely long waiting lists and are not available when they are urgently needed. What programs or funding are in place to address these issues? I don't know if our friends at DOH might have some resources around homelessness programs that we could either follow up with or address live, either way.
Is this, yeah, if you could, sorry, Matt, this is Kristen again. I was not responding because it sounded more like an affordable housing question, but maybe I misheard it. Can you say it again if it is more around homelessness related? Sorry if I missed that.
Sure. So this is a landlord housing very low income senior citizen adults. People face challenges remaining housed when they cannot access transportation, healthcare, et cetera, and they need help with activities of daily living. They write, these resources have really long waiting lists and aren't available when they are urgently needed. Are there programs or funding in place to address these issues?
Thank you. Sorry, I was thinking it was affordable housing when I heard the landlord, so sorry about that. That is an excellent question. As you mentioned, as the commenter mentioned, there are long waiting lists because unfortunately with rental assistance and many of those services, there is simply not enough for everyone. And so with those limited resources, not everyone, it's not easily accessible to everyone. What we do is, and we encourage local community partners to do this too, is just coordinating to know how to access those resources. So at Office of Homeless Initiatives, we'll access the resources within your community for those individuals. So we'd be happy to talk with you in each area about, you know, what are the resources for those particular tenants in that community. It gets localized really quickly. So happy to talk with you about how to help increase connecting those dots. So that's one thing that we can do, is understanding the landscape. At the same time, you all sometimes are the best experts at knowing that landscape. So looking at, you know, various housing resources, we are working with our colleagues around state Medicaid and seeing how to increase that. Some of the vouchers on individuals with disabilities, which often can be our older citizens, and help connecting them to the resources both at Medicaid, Medicare, and within housing rental assistance. So there is not enough of it out there, but we are more than happy to talk with everybody or anyone about how to help connect based on where that project is or those community members are.
Thanks, Kristen. I think that's a great answer. And I would only add that CHFA does have a grant program that we offer called our Direct Effect Awards for nonprofits whose missions overlap our work, which oftentimes can be some of those support services for tenants residing in lower income housing, affordable rental housing, or even in the homeownership space. And so just recently, for example, we were able to award just under $1 million providing grants to nonprofits all across the state. As Kristen said, there is significant need, and so certainly those resources won't fill that gap. And these are our own resources at CHFA that we have available to deploy, so it's not funded through any kind of state or federal program. We're happy to lean into that space, but hear you and certainly echo, yes, it is those resources are quite under supported in Colorado.
Thank you, Jerry Lynn. I'm wondering if we might transition into the next section here, hand it over to Hillary from the Office of Economic Development and International Trade.
Hi, thanks. And thanks everyone for being here, and for my colleagues for the great presentation so far, and for all of your great questions. All of your feedback really helps us think through and develop these programs from, you know, many different perspectives, which is really important as we try to address the needs across the state, which vary widely. So thanks to my friends at CHFA and Housing Colorado for putting this cool slide up. I think that's maybe a train. That's really, I love trains. So my name is Hillary Cooper. I'm the Director of Innovative Funding for Housing Programs at the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Just started this job a couple months ago in May, and it is a new division at OEDIT. Next slide, please. OEDIT's mission is to empower all to thrive in Colorado's economy, and the folks at OEDIT realize that with all the great work on economic development they're doing, this department has basically doubled in the last couple of years, and a lot of fantastic programs being managed through this office. There is a widely recognized need for affordable housing in most all of the programs that are implemented, both from sort of the existing business side and the both national and international business development side. When people are looking at Colorado, not only to sustain their business, but also grow their business, the first question that they often have is, what are you going to do for me about housing, or how can we make sure that our workforce has housing that is readily available, in addition to all the wonderful outdoor amenities that Colorado has to offer. So our approach is this idea of job creation, capital formation, business support, plus affordable housing will enable and empower all to thrive in Colorado's economy. So we built our own program within OEDIT to focus on affordable housing. And we've got a couple programs, next slide, please, that have already been in existence, that have been seeing more and more interest in affordable housing as part of their developments or program implementation. The first is the Commercial Historic Preservation Tax Credits. I don't know how many of you are familiar with these, but it's those tax credits go a long way towards rehabbing historic buildings all across the state. And a lot of those projects are seeing more and more affordable housing development in addition to commercial development as a part of those developments. Also, the enterprise zone contribution projects and vacant building rehabilitation. Again, a lot of those projects are seeing more and more interest in affordable housing being part of those redevelopments. An exciting program that we have is the Space to Create and Community Revitalization program that's managed by Colorado Creative Industries. So it is really thrilled to announce Josh Blanchard, who was a county commissioner in Summit County, is now coming into OEDIT to direct the Colorado Creative Industries, otherwise known as the other CCI. And that program has been working with communities on a Space to Create program, which is affordable housing, also really interesting use of space and using local artists and creative types to bring about, revitalization projects in those communities. So exciting program that we're going to see more and more of. And then finally, OEDIT's traditional economic development and recruiting and incentive tools that kind of spoke to that. It's really important as many of our programs continue to work towards economic development, both sustaining existing businesses, making them strong, keeping them strong in Colorado, and also recruiting new businesses. Affordable housing is a necessary component of that. Next slide, please. And as you've heard a little bit here, we have two new programs that we are focused on in OEDIT. The first to launch was the IHIP, or Innovative Housing Incentive Program, that was started by the legislature 2 years ago. And it includes opportunities, support, incentive tools for modular, 3D, kit, panelized housing opportunities. So the idea is to really incentivize, support small, innovative housing manufacturing ideas, concepts, technologies, even factories, businesses who are getting into the housing market. And if we can, mass produce housing sort of in a modular manufactured way, then hopefully we can have more supply that is more affordable. Some really exciting projects there. The 3D, we now have 6 3D housing printers in the state. Obviously, you're not seeing those in your communities quite yet. Well, 6 of you are, or 6 communities are, but that's a pretty exciting technology, and we may just have the most 3D printers of any state. We're still trying to confirm that. And then the idea for panelized of using, or a product also called cross-laminated timber, of using small diameter salvage projects from wildfire prone mitigation, timber harvest areas, wood products that couldn't otherwise be used for traditional lumber products, using those kind of products to get the benefit of both wildfire mitigation and also creating more affordable opportunities for building housing. Also looking at pairing the IHEP program and the Prop 123. Part of Prop 123 program will be focused on modular and manufactured housing, and pairing the IHEP and Prop 123 dollars for smart targeted investments to really prop up that industry in Colorado. So the increasing demand for modular manufactured housing can be met more and more by Colorado producers, helping with job growth, workforce, et cetera. And then, of course, Prop 123, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but OEDIT manages the Affordable Housing Finance Fund, which, of course, we partner with our team at CHFA to administer those funds. And then also the Middle Income Housing Authority, another state legislatively created new Middle Income Housing Authority to focus on that 80 to 120, or in some cases higher, middle income workforce need. OEDIT is providing administrative support for that housing authority. Next slide, please. And with that, I will wrap it up, and we welcome your questions, comments, and ideas. As I said earlier, really appreciate all the questions that are flowing through this presentation. We're going to have opportunity for question coming up, more specifically on Prop 123. Our contact information, I believe, is shared somewhere in here. And well, there's my email and our office phone number. So feel free to reach out, contact us in the future if you think of things after this. We're my title does include innovative, and so I'm looking for as many interesting, innovative ideas as possible, because as Jerry Lynn and others have pointed out, Prop 123 is a great boost to the affordable housing need in our state, but it's not enough. And so we're going to need to get really innovative and create new tools, new opportunities, leverage new partnerships in order to be successful and get a lot more units built and long-term affordable. Thanks.
Thanks, Hillary, and thanks everyone for your presentations. We're gonna, I think, keep moving unless Matt thinks we should answer some more questions.
Probably good to keep moving in the interest of time,
Okay.
Brian. And then presenters, if you'd like to continue answering questions in writing, that would be really helpful. And then we will again circle back to a final time for Q&A after the panel, which can include questions related to Prop 123 or anything that was presented today.
Great. Well, I will invite those who are going to be talking about Prop 123 to come on camera, and I will introduce you. Again, we're going to talk Prop 123 here for a little while, just to get a little bit more information out there into the world, get some of your questions answered. But for the purposes of this time, I'm going to introduce Kristen Toombs from the Office of Homeless Initiatives at the Division of Housing, Andrew Paredes from the Division of Housing, Steve Johnson from CHFA, and you just heard from Hillary. She's going to be talking on this panel as well. Each of these individuals, we've been on the road to doing this panel, and we're trying to get a little bit deeper into Prop 123 than we already have today. But just to start with Steve, could you talk a little bit deeper about the financing fund, kind of the three buckets of funding that is going to provide money for, and just give us a little bit of a deeper understanding of land banking, concessionary debt, and just blinked on the third one.
Sure can. Thanks, Brian. And
sorry.
yeah, no problem. So we're going to go a little deeper. And this is actually, I want to highlight when we get into land banking, there is an important date that's happening today. And I want to make sure all of you have an opportunity to meet that. But let's just run through at a very high level. First off is land banking, and land banking provides both grants and forgivable loans for the acquisition of property that would be used for affordable housing that's serving residents up to 60% of area median income. Land banking is available only to local governments and nonprofits who have a history of providing affordable housing. We're starting that process with letters of intent, so we have an idea of the volume and the demand. And I can tell you, as of this morning, we had 37 LOIs that had been submitted over the past couple of weeks, equaling, I think it was about $85 million. That LOI period closes today at the end of the day. So this is the important takeaway, the big idea today. If you are a nonprofit or a local government and you had an interest in utilizing the land banking funding, you need to submit an LOI today. Now, if you have not opted in yet, or if your local government hasn't opted in yet, that's perfectly okay. You still can submit an LOI without having opted in. Once we get to an application round, you will need to have opted in, but I just want to be clear that you need to get those LOIs submitted today by the end of the day so we can get you included in that application round, which will then happen shortly after this closes. It will be a competitive process, just given the number and the demand. We'll have probably, I think we can max out around 40 million per the statute. So it's going to be, right now, we're a little over a 2-to-1 right now. But again, that's the critical takeaway for today, is get those land banking LOIs in, just so you can lock in your ability to do that. The equity program is the second program in the statute, and that program is the last that we will roll out probably somewhere near year end. Think about the work that the affordable housing tax credit, the tax credit, the low income housing tax credit, that work does in terms of providing equity into these projects. This equity program will look similar in that it's going to be the primary source of equity in an affordable housing project. Not necessarily paired with tax credits, but we hope as a standalone tool to generate new affordable housing. It has the broadest AMI allowance up to 90%, and that 90% is an average. So you think about as an average, you can go above and below so long as you average in at 90%. But again, we hope a very powerful tool. I've got the least details I'll share on that because we're still in the design phase, working with our partners at OEDIT to making sure that we're rolling out a program that is going to be beneficial. And the last that I'll mention is the concessionary debt. Concessionary debt, you heard Geraldine mention this. We've got really 3 different buckets. We can provide debt financing for low income and middle income projects and preservation. For LIHTC projects, for those projects accessing tax credits, we can provide gap and pre-development. Think pre-development, not something that we've done historically at CHFA, but that'll cover those costs before the application period happens. So environmental work and survey work and those costs that are incurred. And then finally, there's the modular piece that Hillary has mentioned to allow us to really strengthen that industry of modular manufacturers. And again, we anticipate those programs will be opening somewhere in the mid-September range we're targeting right now. So I'll pause there, Brian, and we can always circle back on any specifics.
Thanks, Steve. Andrew, do you want to talk about homeownership at the Division of Housing and Prop 123 funding?
Certainly. Thanks, Brian. As Allison and Mo mentioned earlier, half of the funds that come to the division through Prop 123 are to be used to support homeownership. So currently, the Division of Housing supports homeownership kind of in 3 prongs. First of which is direct development financing. So financing gap funding for the development of affordable homeownership opportunities. Secondly, through down payment assistance programs, the division provides grants to local governments and nonprofits who then in turn make down payment assistance loans to prospective low to moderate income home buyers. And third is through our owner repair program, or our SFOO program. The division also makes grants to local governments and nonprofits to give low interest and deferred loans to low to moderate income home buyers to make necessary health and safety and livability repairs to their homes. Think kind of in order to stay in place or age in place. If you think about a low income senior who might own their home but need to make very necessary repairs. So those are kind of the three outlets that we currently use to support home ownership. Our plan, as Allison mentioned, for this first year, so for the next 10 months, is to use the first year's Prop 123 funds to support these existing programs. So we do not envision creating new programs, markedly changing guidelines to existing programs in this first year as we roll these funds out, but rather to use the funds to support existing programs already in place, while at the same time gathering feedback, suggestions, pros and cons of perhaps new programs or changes to existing programs that we should make looking forward next year and the years to come for rolling out these Prop 123 programs to support homeownership.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to talk about the other portion of the funds coming to the Division of Housing for homelessness resolution and programs.
Thank you, Brian. So similar to what Andrew just shared, for this first year, we're going to be utilizing what we currently have in existence to roll out certain funds for the most part. And so I'll go into that. I can't highlight enough, as Andrew just shared, that we want to hear from you. That's part of why we've been doing these exciting outreach sessions throughout the state. But over the next 10 months, we want to hear from you all on where are we missing, what gaps do we have, and use that as an opportunity as we go into the following year. So what does it look like now? What does it look like for this first year? So in Prop 123, it specifically highlights two activities when it comes to homelessness. It highlights supportive housing and it highlights prevention. There's a third statement about effective activities as determined by Division of Housing to help with homelessness resolution and the prevention of homelessness. So to keep those in mind, that with the intent of that, we are looking at what are those best practices, what are those effective means at helping resolve homelessness or prevent it. So for the first tranche of a lot of those funds, for a lot of those activities rather, we are going to incorporate it, Allison shared this a little bit earlier, into our annual notice of funding availability, our annual application for what we call our Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG program. So that program historically had about $2 million from our partners at HUD from the federal level. As Allison mentioned, we've been utilizing other funds to help try to grow that program. It allows for outreach, shelter, rapid rehousing, prevention, homeless management information system, which is the way to collect all the information so we can efficiently help support people as they move through various programs as they're trying to resolve their homelessness. So we will look to continue to support many of you through that process. And that is an application we've heard that folks are used to. They know it's coming. It's always in August or September. We're hoping to release that very soon. And so stay tuned for that. Stay on the lookout for that. We are looking at how do we utilize what we know from ESG, but also keep the flexibilities of these being state funds. So we're looking at creating that balance with that NOFA. So again, looking at that shelter piece, that outreach piece, rapid rehousing will be incorporated through that. From a supportive housing perspective, for those of you, many of you on this call are very familiar with supportive housing, but for those of you who aren't as familiar, it's basically taking that affordable housing and intentionally connecting and marrying those services so that individuals that have extremely low income, but also complex needs can have them together to have a safe place to live and be successful in that housing. That's the 10-second version of a very complicated best practice that we're very excited to collectively all work on together with you all to make. Oh, Hillary, did you want to jump in? No? Okay.
No, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes the hand goes happy. There, no problem. And so with supportive housing, with CHFA and Andrew's team at Division of Housing and the Office of Homeless Initiatives at Division of Housing, we have been working together for 10 years now with many of you to create supportive housing, because oftentimes you need the services, the vouchers, the tax credits or other financing, and some gap from us. So it's complicated to put them together. And so we have worked hard to do some joint underwriting as best we can. So we will continue to do that and incorporate the Prop 123 funds. So if you're looking to do supportive housing, It's the same process as before, and we will incorporate the Prop 123 funds to just increase that pot so we can hopefully make more supportive housing. So what does that look like? That is, annually we have the creation of supportive housing requests for applications, or what we like to call the PSH RFA. And that has 4 due dates each year. We have one round we're going through right now that's in conjunction with CHFA's 4% and state tax credits. And so that is going through right now, and we will have one more. And then we usually release the next one. We have the 4 follow the calendar year. So we will release that next one in November or December. And so again, follow your same thing if you're going to do PSH, and we will incorporate the funds there. For prevention, many of us know that through COVID, one thing that came about loud and clear between the emergency rental assistance program and the eviction moratorium is how critical prevention resources are and how little we have had in the state before that. And so we are looking at how can we incorporate increasing our ongoing resources around prevention for the state once the CARES Act and the other stimulus funds go away that were helping with the ERAP program. So we look to be releasing an RFA for that soon. And that will take lessons learned from the ERAP program and other prevention programs we have. But that was hundreds of millions of dollars. That would take up all of Prop 123. So we are not able to do that at that size. So looking at how can we scale it down, not because the need isn't there, but just again, the resources are not there on an ongoing basis at that scale. So we're really looking at how do we take the lessons learned to really make as impactful of a program as we can, knowing it will need to be significantly more than we've ever had before COVID, but not as much as the ERAP program was. So stay tuned for that. So again, ESG program, PSH RFA, new prevention RFA, and then we'll work with you all over the next 10 months to come up with new ways to tweak any of these or where else we might be missing. And with that, I'll stop. Thanks,
Great,
Brian.
thanks, Kristen. Andrew, can you talk to us about baselining and kind of the process for that? I know Mo touched on it a little bit, but where are we at in that process? What does it mean for a community to opt in, and kind of what are the benefits, rewards for doing that?
Certainly. So, as you all have heard, in order for beneficiaries within the borders of a municipality, city, town, or unincorporated portions of a county, that local government needs to have opted in and made a commitment to increase its affordable housing stock by 3% per year over the next 3 years. And that means that, first off, that local government needs to establish a baseline, or where are they starting from? And that's the point from which their growth of affordable housing stock will be measured year over year for these next 3 years. The first part really is working with our tool online at the Engage DOLA website to establish your local government's baseline. There are a couple of ways with which that can be done. Unfortunately, the establishment of the baseline and the tools are limited by statute. So we here at DOLA are happy to work with local governments to establish their baseline, and we'll do everything we can to make it as user-friendly and as kind of growth target friendly as possible within the bounds of the statute. Once a baseline is established, then that unlocks Prop 123 resources that can be spent or invested within that city, town, or county. That does not mean that the city, town, or county must be the applicant and recipient for each funding application, but that a developer, a housing authority, a nonprofit, or the city, town, or county can apply for Prop 123 funds, and those funds can be invested within the borders of that city, town, or county. So that's very important. Opting in needs to happen first, at which point investment with Prop 123 dollars can be made within that jurisdiction. It's also important to note that once a commitment is made, that 3-year growth target is in play, meaning that the city, town, or county has committed to and will do what they can to grow the affordable housing stock within its borders over 3 years. But if that does not happen, the consequences are that jurisdiction isn't eligible for Prop 123 funding in year 4. It does not mean that any investment made over these next 3 years must be recaptured, clawed back, or paid back. That is not on the table. So if a commitment is made, that unlocks investment for these next 3 years. If the growth target isn't hit, that investment remains in place. It doesn't have to be paid back. And the local government will then go back to the drawing board, let's call it, in year 4 to make its next commitment starting in year 5. So I think that's the biggest point of emphasis I want to make, is that if the growth target isn't hit, no repayment of those funds will be required. But I stop there, Brian, and you can give me some clarification questions if you like.
No, I appreciate that, Andrew, and hopefully that's helpful for those listening. You know, again, local municipality has to opt in, which means establishing their baseline, committing to a 3% per year growth of affordable housing stock over a 3-year average, and there is no clawback on money. Kristen, can you just talk really quickly what the exception to that requirement for opting in is as it relates to your work?
Yes, absolutely. So in regards to receiving funds that are serving people experiencing homelessness, so the ESG and the prevention, so anything that's not about the development of the actual units, that is in regards to homelessness, you do not have to have your local government opting in order for a non-government entity in that jurisdiction to apply. So if City A does not opt in, Shelter A in that city can apply, and the shelter can receive some funds. That's the simplest way to say it. So there you go.
Thanks, Kristen. Yes, so there's an exception in there for not buildings, but programs that are addressing homelessness. And so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So we've talked, Steve, you talked a little bit about AMIs in terms of the financing fund. Can you talk to us about what House Bill 23, sorry, there was House Bill 22-1304, my apologies, what House Bill 23-1304 did around AMIs in the state?
Sure thing. And what I might do is just expand your question a little bit and just talk about options to modify AMIs. And I'm not taking over as moderator, Brian. I just want to I want to address this a couple different ways. So we talked about the AMIs in the program, and there's a couple of options to modify those AMIs. Under the concessionary debt, if the debt is subordinate to senior debt and that senior debt carries a different AMI than the subordinate debt, the Prop 123 debt would allow that senior debt AMI to be operative. So let's just give a practical example of that. The subordinate debt carries a 60% average AMI limitation, as we talked about. If it is subordinate to debt that is perhaps setting it at 80% AMI, perhaps a middle income project, then the program, the statute allows that Prop 123 debt to match that 80% AMI. Your question may be, well, Steve, my senior debt has no restrictions, so there, now you have no restrictions in your Prop 123. Well, nice try, but we're not going to allow that because it would still have to meet the intent of serving low and middle income. So that's one way you could modify. The other way, as Brian just mentioned, was through the House Bill 1304, 23-1304, which made some cleanups and some slight changes to Proposition 123. It had an allowance to allow for rural resort counties to petition to change their AMI. And there would be a process for that. So those rural resort counties could petition and actually have those AMIs adjusted for purposes of Proposition 123. There's a very specific, you know who you are if you're a rural resort county. You also know that there's the opportunity for those designations, and this is Andrew's expertise, but there are some specific designations around if you would desire to actually have that change from rural to rural resort. And Andrew, I might just pass it to you briefly if you wanted to touch on that. But again, that allows the second way for those AMIs to be modified is if you are a rural resort county and you petition to DOLA to make that change.
Certainly, Steve, thanks. We will have through our engaged DOLA portal as well as on our regular DOLA-DOH website, a portal by which requests or for exception can be sent to the Division of Housing and considered for approval of that exception. We had a similar process, over the last couple of years through House Bill 22-1304 and the programs it outlined and making the initial geographic designations where communities could request an exception. We will use that same portal and reception of exception requests for these next round of Prop 123 exception requests. So we haven't yet built it out and have the exact scoring or process rubric yet, but the plan is to use what we have in place from House Bill 22-1304 and put that into practice for these Prop 123 exception requests.
Great. Thanks to you both. Hillary, is there anything you could sort of enlighten us a little bit about the modular investments, especially here in year one, kind of what the thinking over at OEDIT and CHFA is around modular?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I would love to, and again, welcome people's feedback on this because we're trying to figure out sort of a unprecedented investment in the modular industry in Colorado through this approach. So actually I shouldn't say that because IHIP has been a pretty significant investment in modular in Colorado, but we're partnering it with IHIP and trying to fill some of the gaps that were left by the statute that created IHIP. So the governor has a goal, the state has a goal of more housing now. So our task is to get as many units built as soon as possible. And we recognize that part of the way to do that is to create more affordable housing products. So modular, manufactured, the innovative approaches that I talked about earlier that IHIP is supporting. And we're hearing, as I think one of the questions came up on this call, we're hearing that there's a gap in financing because of the way modular is built in a factory and then delivered on site. There's not a lot of opportunities for construction loans because it's not a traditional sort of stick-built on-site program. So banks aren't offering products that will finance the modular component for the developer before it gets delivered on site. But the modular industry really needs to be paid in order to create the product before they deliver it to the site. So there's that missing gap there. And then in addition to that, we currently have, the state has 4 manufacturers of modular homes in the state. We would like to see more. Currently, the state's production are not currently at the end of 2022, the state's production of modular manufactured housing was about 1.2% of the need across the state for housing, and traditionally currently in states that have really strong modular home manufacturing industries, that percentage is about 6%. So supplying 6% of the supply of housing products. We know that modular manufactured homes can be done much more, or can be done efficiently in a more time efficient and also energy efficient way. When done in the factory, they can be built year round. There's all sorts of benefits. So we're going to take 55%, about 55% of the concessionary debt portion of the Affordable Housing Finance Fund, which is the OEDIT CHFA portion of Prop 123. We're going to take about 55% of that program and invest it into modular for the first year. So both supporting existing factories for that sort of financing gap that I mentioned. And then also we hope to close the funding gap for maybe 2 to 3 factories that are just trying to get that final funding that they need in order to build a factory and start producing units within 12 to 18 months. So hoping to use that as it's going to be around $18 million, hoping to use that as a one-time boost to the industry. And then we'll go back to a more split allocation for those concessionary debt dollars.
Great, thanks, Hillary. Before we go to questions, and I see a couple in the chat, which we'll get to. Is there anything else that you all would like to mention? I think we've covered most of the questions that we've covered previously, but if there's anything else, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, and were we in person, I would have said this already 5 times, but I want to, you've probably seen it in the chat. Please go to the website that we have stood up, the Colorado Affordable Housing Financing Fund.com. You're going to see that in the chat shortly if you haven't already. On that site, you will have access and links to literally everything you're going to need program related, including a link to the site with Mo and his team that has a list of all of the areas that have opted in and are participating, application materials, LOIs, if you're looking for the LOI, because you know now you only have 6 hours left to apply for or to submit an LOI for land banking, go to that website, Colorado Affordable Housing Financing Fund.com. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to ask this question that's in the chat. I think this will go to you, Kristen. Nikki asks, I love hearing about a focus on homelessness prevention funding. Is any of that funding specific to diversion programming?
Oh, I love that question, Nikki. So for those of us that live in this homelessness world, prevention and diversion have been terms that we are increasingly geeking out on, as I like to say. So what does it, at what point is it diversion? At what point is it prevention? So what I can tell you, so for those who don't know, diversion is thought of as you're literally about to knock on that door, or you're knocking on the door of that shelter. And how do we help you not have to enter the shelter? More in the homelessness world, traditionally, or historically, I should say, before COVID, prevention was more around that, and the funding for it was around the imminent risk. So within 14 days, you are going to lose your housing, and we have proof of that. We are currently, Nikki, looking at how can we support all of that? Again, knowing that we have limited funds, there will need to be some look at how do we prioritize and what's that look like? So more to come, but there is not a set yes or no, or there is not a set no. And I would think in the ESG, NOFA, I believe we do have diversion in there. We added that in a few years ago. So you should be able to see that. So that again will be coming out soon. So this is a good note for me to double check and see that that is indeed in there, or if not, understand why. And then I would just say, stay tuned for the prevention NOFA for the details there.
Great, thanks, Kristen. I'm going to go through the questions that are popping in the chat. So if you are a developer who has requested funds from Prop 123 in year 3 of the program, and you've made substantial progress towards closing, but early in year 4, you have yet to close on financing and your jurisdiction no longer qualifies for Prop 123, would your project no longer be eligible? i.e., would you all of a sudden have a big financing gap? I'll turn that one over to Andrew.
I'm happy to answer that, Brian, and then I'll look at Steve from and Hillary from the CHFA OEDIT side. But my sense is kind of erring on the cautious side of statute, not having deeply investigated this and run it through for an opinion. I would say that scary scenario is likely one that we will want to plan for and assume that, yes, that funding would not be able to be made, that check would not be able to be written in year 4. So in planning for that towards the end of year 3, we would make sure to prioritize application windows, contracting timelines, and contract execution in order to meet that deadline.
And I might just add on that, Andrew, let me kind of kick it back to you. I was thinking maybe specifying a little more in that question. If we have committed to a project, for example, and then that year flips over, but we're just in that closing period and we have committed, would that look a little different than a project that has maybe submitted an application but hasn't even gotten to the commitment phase? And I just sort of want to parse this out a little bit if there's a safer space.
Yep, I'd love to say more to come on that, as we really should. Now we're really getting into the nitty gritty and the weeds of detail and statute and fiscal rules, where we want to get the state controller and the attorney general to offer us an opinion. So definitely want to punt on that, but I think at the moment, if pressed, thankfully it's 3 years away, but if pressed, we would want to err on the side of caution until we get some kind of a backing interpretation.
And Andrew, I think this is a little bit of maybe a tangential question to that one. Can you remind us what counts towards a project's development? Is it certificate of occupancy? Is it
Thanks, Brian.
construction permit?
So, as it relates to localities, thinking about what counts towards that 9% growth target, it is new building permits. So new permits issued are what are counted towards that growth target of affordable housing over that 3-year period, in addition to new affordable housing opportunities that have come online as a direct result of Prop 123 investments.
Hillary, go ahead.
Thanks, Brian. I'll just add to that timing question. One of the things that we're looking at, and this is specifically referred to in statute, that especially on the financing side, these programs are intended to fill gaps. So the funding, most of them at least, are intended to fill gaps. So the idea is that hopefully you will be bringing other funding sources to the table. They're also, because it's a limited amount of funds, they're not really intended to provide 100% of your capital needs. They're intended to either fill senior or subordinate debt, the equity piece, which is a little more complex. We'll have more details on that later. Also the land banking piece. Hopefully you have projects are a little bit through the development or the financing research stage to understand what their other funding opportunities are, and you're coming to us to ask for Prop 123 funds to fill gaps. One of the reasons for that is that our charge is more housing now. And so we need to, we will be reviewing all of these projects with an eye for, are these units going to be built? Are there too many things standing in the way? Do they have everything lined up? Are they ready to go? How shovel ready are these projects? And that is going to be different for different type of projects for sure. But the idea is not to sit on these funds for extended period of time. It's to get them building units now. So it's not probably something that you come to first just to see if Prop 123 funds can be available, and then you go out and figure out if you can build the project. It's probably something that you're going to come to after you've already figured out how you can build the rest of the project, and you've just identified the gaps in the funding.
Thanks, Hillary. I'm going to hop to this last question from Mary Ellen before we get to a couple others that I think are broader beyond Prop 123 questions, which we obviously have time for. So Mary Ellen's question, I think, Steve, I'll hand this to you. If a jurisdiction signs on, what is the hypothetical timeline if an LOI for land banking is approved? We hope to purchase a buildable lot for 7 units this fall. Can you talk to us, Steve, just about the land banking timelines in general? And when do things have to be developed or have a plan in place?
Sure, and I'll do it at a high level. And it sounds like if you've got a specific project question, please reach out to me, reach out to Hillary, and we can walk through a specific project. But in the statute, there's a 5-year and a 10-year window deadline, if you will, in 5 years. So let's say you acquire property year 1. By year 5, the property has to be zoned properly for the intended affordable housing use. By year 10, it has to be essentially developed and financed, put in place. So those are deadlines that would allow the money not to be clawed back. So it's a forgivable loan to a nonprofit. So that forgivability happens if you achieve those timelines. The reality is we'd like to see things move much faster because we know there is just incredible housing demand today. And so the expectation is there's going to be, in looking at applications, there's a preference that one of those preference would be shovel ready. So are we ready to move forward on projects? So projects is ready today versus 10 years from now would preferentially be be preferential to a project that's going to be later. But then let me step back on the timeline. So LOIs closed tonight at 11:59. Thanks for that clarification in the email. Once we get those LOIs in, we will announce the opening of an application round. And it will likely be a competitive round because we're already over 2-1. Those application round will open. I don't have the calendar in front of me of sort of where we're proposing, but one of the nuances is that localities can opt in all the way to November 1. And so we want to be mindful of that, of how to sort of manage through that later date of November 1. But we'll have an application round. Once the application round closes, we will announce awards and we would issue commitments to those who were selected, those that were successful. With that commitment, then that would trigger an opportunity for either the closing or they would go through and acquire the land, either as a refinance if they needed to buy it first, or if our money is the first in. So that sort of the high level process. But again, there's going to be I'm going to use the word a preference because the statute already lays out priorities, but there will be a preference for being shovel ready. Those projects can move forward quicker.
Thanks, Steve. I do see another Prop 123 question, but I think that this was kind of an exclamation point on something that was said earlier from Joe. So I'm going to move us into, and feel free, folks, to type other questions that you might have. I think we've been doing a pretty good job of answering along the way. But a couple of questions here that I think are broader than Prop 123. So I'll ask anybody else on the call on the webinar to answer these. First question is for mobile homeowners that are looking for home repairs that exceed the value of the home. Is there an option to replace the home with perhaps a quote newer mobile home? I think that might be one to kick over to Mo, perhaps to help us out on.
Actually, good morning. I think that'd be best answered by Andrew, actually.
Okay. I'll let Andrew answer that one.
Sorry about that. I was replying to another question, trying to do a couple things at the same time. Could you say that again, Brian?
Sure. So for a mobile home owner that's looking for home repairs that exceed the value of the home, is there an option to replace the home with a newer mobile home?
Boy, that's the kind of thing that we want to hear about and kind of, stakeholding ideas for future Prop 123 programs. We don't have necessarily an absolute home replacement specific program currently under our down payment assistance or owner repair programs. So I hope that is in the chat. I will also make a note of it as we begin to think about and come back out to everybody seeking input for potential future programs. It's certainly something that is eligible under Prop 123. So we want to consider this kind of thing as we look to generating new programs for next year and the years to come.
Thanks for that, Andrew. I'm going to ask, let's see, just pop down. So kind of anybody here, question is, I'd love to hear more about middle income / workforce housing. Many communities across the state don't have adequate or affordable housing for teachers and other essential roles. Maybe folks at CHFA, could we talk a little bit more about middle income access program? Hillary, would you be able to give us a high level of the Middle Income Housing Authority, kind of what that whole thing is about. CHFA folks, do you want to answer first?
And thank you, Brian. So middle income has definitely been an area of growth that we've experienced over the past several years. And we were incredibly pleased to have received 25 million of funding through the Division of Housing to strengthen our middle income program even further. I think in the span of about 2 or 3 months, we had nearly earmarked almost the entirety of that financing for projects that are ready to go. And those typically are projects that are serving between 80% AMI and 120% AMI, roughly sort of in that middle income range. So if you have projects or you are aware of projects, or if you would like to develop a project to serve that, please call me, email me or my team. We have funding available. It's definitely an area where we have tools, and I think the tools can work very, very well. So please reach out.
And yeah, just to add on to that, so the well, first of all, the concessionary debt program does include low and middle income, as defined in statute for Prop 123 funds. At least the middle income goes up to 90% average AMI for some of the financing programs, which allows for, you know, a little bit above 90 and a little bit below 90, or maybe a lot if you can get to that 90% average. So that allows sort of above that low income, which is defined by, you know, by tech available credits, or an average of 60%. So there is some room for that to address that middle income piece in Prop 123, and we recognize that there is a lot more demand for that type of housing, and we anticipate that we'll get a lot of applications for that, because there hasn't traditionally been, other than the program CHFA is talking about, there hasn't traditionally been a lot of funding available for that type of housing, that level of income. In addition, OED administers MIHA, which is the Middle Income Housing Authority. MIHA is a special purpose authority, which is like CHFA. MIHA is basically what CHFA was about 50 years ago, so it's brand new. And MIHA has the authority to provide tax-free bonds to middle income housing projects. Middle income defined by under the MIHA statute is 80 to 120% AMI, or up to 140% if you're in one of those resort rural, which there's a specific list of that DOLA maintains. So those are additional opportunities. We're seeing a lot of interest, fully recognize the need for teachers, government workers, you know, local service providers, et cetera, who are just making a little bit too much for that low income levels, but still can't afford free market opportunities. So hoping to build on those. We're hearing, as Colorado develops programs, we're hearing from a lot of investors, developers, housing advocates around the country that, you know, as Colorado is developing these opportunities, they're really interested in helping. So we're at OED, we're exploring some of those relationships to help continue to leverage those funding opportunities.
Thanks so much. I'm going to turn to Cheryl's question here. She starts, any update on renovating projects, and then continues, renovating existing affordable housing and extending its life/deed restriction and rehabbing single family LMI homes. Will these count towards the 9%? So I think she's referring to the 9% growth target in Prop 123. I think Andrew, maybe, can you answer that?
I can certainly try, and then look at Mo, you know, for further color and clarification. You know, on the surface, you know, the answer there is likely no, as you know, what is counted towards the growth target are building permits for new affordable housing units. There are some exceptions and carve-outs there. If if we were talking about a property that was not previously deed restricted, needed a permit and would, and then would be permanently deed restricted afterwards, or if it was supported by Proposition 123 funding. Having said that, the statute does have specific ways in which something can count towards a target. It also, allows for units, that come online and are permitted for growth that don't take advantage of any Prop 123 funding, also count towards that target. So while there are some aspects that don't, but they would be programs perhaps supported by DOH or Prop 123 or CHFA OEDIT funding, there are also, on the flip side, things that might happen within a community not supported by any of this funding that do kind of, I'll use big quotes, accidentally, count towards that growth target. So there is some positive and negative pull and push on the margins, that do and don't count towards that target. Mo, can you provide any color or anything I missed in terms of, some of these owner repair type programs or rehab type programs that do or don't count towards growth?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And I just sent the specific law and some color commentary in response to the Q&A. It's a convoluted sentence that's provided in the statute that provides guidance or direction, if you will, on what counts. We've engaged in some conversations early on about it, and there have been some great suggestions from stakeholders, but it really is something we have to unpack further, also requiring legal guidance. So we're going to start these conversations in earnest. I think we're shooting for next month in September to start the discussions about what actually counts in response to the direction provided in the law. So more to follow on that. We've got some time. Obviously, we're not going to have to make these final determinations until December 2026 for the first round of 3-year commitments. But we would like to have something outlined and specific guidelines, if you will, well before then. So stay tuned for those conversations. If you have not signed up for the Division of Housing newsletter that I mentioned earlier, and I think somebody provided a link to that in a chat here somewhere, please do sign up, because we'll be providing communications about those opportunities through that forum. And of course, the Engage website that we shared earlier. So if you sign up for one of those two things, if not both, you'll hear about opportunities to have those discussions. But sorry, we can't get into all the specifics you want right now about what counts. I can share the statute, which I just did, and just let you know more to follow in the near future.
Great. I see. Well, there was a question about the tenant equity vehicle. I think both Steve and Hillary answered. But do you want to just talk about the TEV just real quickly, Steve?
Sure. At a high level, the tenants who reside in properties that are supported with equity, so receive the equity tool through Prop 123, eligible for a tenant equity vehicle. They have to have resided in the project for at least 12 months to be eligible. And one important clarification is that it is not funded at the project level, but it's funded at the program level. So in other words, the development, the project financials are not impacted as a result of the tenant equity vehicle. It's funded at the program side. So as we see a return on the funds that we put into projects, that funding at the program level will then be put back into tenant equity vehicle. The specifics of it, whether it's going to be in the form of a monthly support or an annual support or something larger, that's still working out the details. There are a lot of nuances that we want to be both careful with and making sure that we're meeting both the spirit and the intent of the legislation, which was initially supporting those tenants who had a desire to move into home ownership. So what can we do to help toward down payment toward home ownership? We talked about 1304. 1304 expanded it a little bit to allow us also to help them grow their savings, because we know many residents struggle with just meeting basic needs of medicine and food and education. And so we want to be mindful of that. And so we'll have more details coming out. But again, the tenant equity vehicles for residents of those projects that receive the equity financing. and that equity financing, they have to have lived there at least 12 months to be eligible.
Great. Thank you so much. I see, Cindy, I see your kind of statement here in the chat, and let me just say that we are taking that. I'm gonna ask that Division of Housing in particular kind of take your thoughts under consideration, unless somebody wants to weigh in on this. It's pretty long, so I don't want to read it all, but it has to do with the prioritization that Prop 123 has, in her estimation, not towards those making under 30% AMI, but perhaps an opportunity for federal ARPA funds to go towards some to folks with disabilities. So I want to just say that we've captured that, and we'll be looking into ways to address that.
Brian, I can just also add quickly, we have been in touch about at least one of those projects. So I think with Andrew's team, so I think it comes down to project by project specifically about what funds are eligible. So, but happy to talk. We're happy to talk with you about both of those. And then I will say that don't forget that supportive housing is in priority specifically listed out in Prop 123 under the homelessness program. And so some of those funds will go towards the development of supportive housing, which is often for individuals with disabilities. Now I know it's not, and have had long histories of experiencing homelessness. So I know it's probably a Venn diagram of the particular population you're talking about here, but there is some overlap there. So again, happy to talk with you directly about those two projects, but then also when it comes to disabilities, fixed income or no income, and experiencing homelessness, that's where Prop 123 and supportive housing would overlap. So it doesn't, again, 100% answer what you're talking about, but it fits for some of that population.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, and I'm feeling like we have addressed a lot of issues and things on the call today. But please know, hopefully you captured our contact information as we went through slides today. There will be an email coming out in the next couple of days with the slide deck from the earlier presentation, as well as a couple of surveys, one from the Division of Housing, actually just one survey, one from the Division of Housing. So please, if you have an opportunity, just weigh in a little bit, give us some feedback on the webinar, on the statewide outreach. But we really appreciate everybody's time for spending their Monday morning with us. We really appreciate your investment in the housing community here in Colorado and in creating more housing, preserving housing, and addressing the needs of our state's citizens. So thank you all. Take care. We again appreciate you being here, and have a good day.